What's going on, y'all? Machiavelli Mills TV. So Brandon Marshall is going on his media tour, and he is pissed off to the highest degree of pissivity. He going off on a lot of different people, right? His former colleagues on I Am Athlete, in particular Fred Taylor, Channing Crowder, etc. But he also took a shot at Shannon Sharpe. Basically, he's saying that Shannon Sharpe is not a member of the football fraternity because he doesn't act like one. He acts like a media member, a guy who grew up being a media analyst, because he's been tearing athletes down recently, right? And in particular, he named Russell Wilson. And so when I saw this, I said, let's analyze Shannon Sharpe and what he's been saying. Because honestly, I don't think he's been unfair to Russell Wilson in his criticism. He hasn't attacked that man personally. He hasn't called that man out of his name or none of that. He's been honest about his on-field performance and his disconnect within that locker room, the Denver Broncos locker room, and how things like Russell Wilson having an office, at the stadium is just crazy, and that led to the disconnect and, the turmoil or tension across his teammates, right? That's all he's really said and done. He's never attacked Russ personally, never called him corny, none of that. He just said it was certain things that Russ was doing that led to the disconnect. So for Brandon Marshall to try to nitpick at that, to say, oh, Shannon is he doing too much, he be going way out of bounds, that's crazy to me, you know what I mean? Because he's essentially accusing Shannon Sharpe of clout chasing when one can argue Brandon Marshall has been on a clout chasing tour, with going on these different shows like Cam Newton's show and attacking and going off on other people left and right. You know what I mean? You can argue that Brandon is going on his own clout chasing tour himself. See, this is the thing. Brandon Marshall, it appears that he's clout chasing to get back on top, to regain his media, his top spot in the media that he had when I Am Athlete was surging, and it was the hottest thing smoking, right? And they were the hottest thing smoking when it was Brandon Marshall, Fred Taylor, Channing Crowder, Chad Ocho, and they would have other different people coming in and out, and Chef Nancy was still on the show. A lot of things transpired since then. Fred Taylor, Channing Crowder, Ocho have all left. They've gone on to do other bigger and better things. The Pivot podcast is humongous, way bigger than I Am Athlete is now. I Am Athlete is I'm talking about nobody. I don't know nobody that watches I Am Athlete anymore. The people who were currently there with Brandon Marshall after the departure of Fred Taylor, Chad Ocho, and Channing Crowder, they've since gone. I've seen a clip of Brandon Marshall. I researched it. He's interviewing people by himself now. You know what I mean? And so this is really what it is about too. Ocho is on a show that is that Nightcap or YouTube channel that I'm talking about. They've been up for a month and a half, and they are huge. Women watch that channel that don't even watch sports because they like to see the chemistry, the dialogue, the back and forth between Chad and Uncle Shannon Sharpe, because they play well off of each other, right? They talk about a lot of different topics that are not just football related, that relates to life, that relates to entertainment news, that relates to different holiday seasons, etc. Things that go on in an everyday person's life they talk about. And it's successful. It's humongously successful. It's just gaining more traction by the day. I think that Brandon Marshall sees that, and what Ocho, he done grabbed Ocho up, and Ocho used to be over there with Brandon, and I think Brandon is bitter about that. Brandon is also bitter about the success of the Pivot podcast, because he's come forth and talked about how he's lost a whole lot of money and how his income has went down drastically, from when I Am Athlete started. And I don't wish that on nobody. I don't wish nobody to lose no money. I don't wish nobody to miss out on no good bread that they was getting, especially when that man got family and got kids. I don't wish that on people, especially a black brother. I don't wish that on him. But Brandon's downfall is the result of him having a humongous ego, not letting his ego get into his way, and also, having his own insecurities about things. So I think in many ways, Brandon Marshall sabotaged himself. Now he's trying to attack other folks for stuff that they doing, you know what I mean? And not talking about things that he should have done better, things that he could have corrected. You know what I mean? So to act like Shannon is the enemy of the athlete is just ridiculous and is way out of bounds to me. I feel like Shannon is very fair. He's criticizing people, sometimes harshly for sure. I can say that I've not agreed with everything that Shannon Sharpe has done and said, but I don't see him attack people personally for the most part. It stays within the realm of the sport, and a lot of it can be, for the most part, is fair to me. I feel like Brandon is just looking for a target, and maybe he thinks if he does that, it'll gain more traction if he comes and attacks certain people, etc. Or he's just pissed off that Ocho is over there. Shannon and grabbed up Ocho, and they blooming and blossoming, and he's thinking about the great times during COVID when I Am Athlete kept all of us entertained. When we was in the house all going crazy, stressing out of our mind. I had a newborn baby at that time. You know what I mean? So you in the house, we in the house taking care of the baby and all of that, and that was entertainment. For me. And my son's mother was watching that show as well, with sometimes with me, because she found it entertaining the way they would talk about things and talk about life outside of football. Brandon and no longer is in that space anymore. I Am Athlete started to fall off. I feel like you can start to see Channing and Fred be a little disinterested a little bit. But when they started doing that NASCAR stuff, dog, that was the beginning of the end. But when Fred and Shannon left, I'm going to be real with y'all. I went over there. Because when he replaced the other dudes, I watched a few episodes. They was pretty solid. Shady McCoy was great. That was a great episode, a bounce back episode for them. But a lot of the episodes didn't feel the same. It lacked the luster and the entertainment factor that Shannon Crowder and Fred Taylor brought to the show. Even when Chef Nancy was gone, I'm like, yo, this don't even feel like the same show no more, man. But yeah, man. I never wanted to see Brandon's downfall and nothing like that. I'm gonna say this too. Brandon was one of my favorite football players playing. I feel like a really underrated wide receiver. When you look at Brandon Marshall's statistics, I promise y'all, I remember I put up Brandon Marshall's statistics on YouTube, not on YouTube, on Facebook and Twitter. And I didn't say who it was. I just put up the stats. I said, is this Hall of Fame? And a lot of people said yes. Right, Brandon was a special receiver when he came to my Chicago Bears. When he broke all the receiving records. Now, some would say it's not hard to do because the Bears have never had prominent quarterback play to get mega receiving statistics. But Brandon was special, 1,500 yards, all of that. He was big time. You know what I mean? But yeah, man, Brandon. To me, even with him being a great football player, Brandon was never he was never the straw that stirred the drink on that show. I don't know anybody that came to just watch Brandon. People came to see what Chad was going to say, Shannon, what Fred was going to bring, and Brandon was just playing moderator. You know, he was a good moderator at times. But I remember when he was on First Things First on FS1, I'm not going to lie to y'all, I'm not being mean-spirited. That was some of the most underwhelming sports debate television footage I've ever watched with Brandon Marshall. Brandon Marshall was very underwhelming on that show, to the point where I was feeling like an average Joe could do better than what Brandon was doing. Brandon's sports takes were so outlandish, and I feel like he really couldn't even, not articulate himself, because he can't talk. He can talk for sure. But I felt like he never even, I don't know, he couldn't really relay what he was trying to say properly, or even make a good case for what he was saying, any of the arguments. I'm like, yo, that's not a good argument to me. That's not a strong argument. You know, and I will say that time and time again watching First Things First. Like, yo, Brandon does not fit on here. Brandon's takes are so outlandish and so wild. I remember Brandon say he'd beat Deontay Wilder and them in boxing. I was like, yo, my man is out here losing his goddamn mind. I don't know, because this is crazy. You get your bell rung. You hear me? Be sleep for two. You might take the long nap messing with Deontay Wilder, one of them, right? Not even trying to be funny, but yeah, man, I just think Brandon doesn't realize his lack of humility and his ego is responsible for a lot of that stuff falling apart around him. And now he's trying to throw shots at other people. He got to look at himself in the mirror, man. Yeah, I think staying humble would have helped Brandon in a lot of ways. And breaking up that pie, how it was supposed to be broken up, it would have done wonders for that. You know what I mean? It would have done wonder. He would have still been thriving and blossoming, etc. But Brandon was wanting to put, he had a lot of different goals outside of the podcast, wanting to put stuff into the gym, into, I believe, his wife's clothing line or something that she was doing, etc. Which, okay, you can put your own bread into that, but you got to break them brothers off accordingly, because they were the mainstay of the show. They were the draws of the show, in my opinion. But yeah, I don't like him trying to act like Shannon is just like, oh my God, he's the antithesis of a sports commentator, or he's the antichrist. And he didn't say the antichrist, but he was acting like Shannon is just like the furthest thing away from a person being in the football fraternity. He's not in the football fraternity. One, Brandon, you are a great player, but Shannon Sharpe was a better player than you, and he's in the Hall of Fame. So that man's in a football fraternity, and he ain't out here just belittling guys every turn. He's talking about on-field play when guys don't play well. Just because a guy doesn't always pat every guy on the back when they don't play well, just because a guy is vocal about a guy not either missing assignments on the field or dropping passes, etc., he's vocal about guys doing things that can be deemed distractions to teams. That doesn't make him a guy who's not for players. It doesn't make him a guy who's anti-player. That doesn't make him a guy who's now just not a part of the football playing fraternity anymore. Brandon is being a little sensitive. He's being sensitive, and he's looking at the sensitivities of other guys on the field, and they feel like, a lot of these players feel like you're not supposed to say anything about them. I do feel like there's a certain way you talk about a man, even when you critique him. I feel like sometimes people can go out of bounds with what they say about a person, even when they're not playing well. I've seen that for sure. And, I don't agree with everything that Shannon has said, but I don't, like, Shannon Sharpe is the furthest thing away from, like, a person who is anti-player or whatever, right? I've criticized Shannon for, when he was trying to protect Deion Sanders and the way he tried to come across about how HBCU wasn't his first choice, and he was so vocal about that. When in order to protect and lay coverage for his friend Deion Sanders, when Deion left Jackson State to Colorado, he tried to cover Deion Sanders by talking about how HBCU was never his first choice and all of that. And I'm like, why are you saying this out loud? It's like denigrating to HBCUs, because that HBCU gave you the platform for you to elevate, to be seen, to get drafted, right? When other schools would not take a chance on you because of your grades. Other than that, I don't really have a lot of negative stuff to say about Shannon for the most part, right? Even when I don't agree with him on certain things, but Brandon Marshall is being sensitive, and he's pissed off that other people have gone to greener pastures after leaving him, namely Chad Ocho, who's now partnered up with Shannon Sharpe. And, I've seen a lot of people getting mad at Brandon's antics and his ways, namely Ryan Clark, fellow member of Kappa Alpha Psi. And Brandon Marshall is a brother of Kappa Alpha Psi, my fraternity as well. So I don't wish bad for him, but he got to recognize when he's getting in his own way and the stuff that he's done that led to the downfall.